Well, hello. Tonight I'm going to show with you how to do a leak down test on a motorcycle. The reason I'm doing this leak down test is a fella came in with this motorcycle in front of me. He tried to start it for the first time this year. Turned it over. There's a big backfire. Sounded like something broke, he said, and it just wouldn't start. In fact, the starter wouldn't turn over, which is always a scary thing. Usually that's an indication something major's happened. Turns out not the case, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but I thought if there's ever a time to do a diagnostic on the engine, now it is it. And what I've decided to do is run a quick leak down test on the engine. There's two kinds of compression test you can do on an engine. You can do a leak down test and you can do a conventional compression test. Leak down doesn't test compression as much as it does engine sealing, which results in compression. So what I did was I was going to run a compression test, which is simply the amount of pressure the engine can build up when you spin the starter. Instead, I've decided to do this because this is much more indicative of the health of the engine, how long it can hold pressure, and to what degree it allows the built gas pressure to leak from the engine through the valves, through the rings, and through the head if there's a leak in the head, specifically the gasket. So in order to do a leak down test, you need the tool. This is a Motion Pro tool. It's not a top shelf tool, but they're still very expensive. This probably cost me a couple $100, this kit. Comes with, I like it because Motion Pro is a motorcycle specific company, and I know the adapters will all fit most motorcycles. This particular bike is a 98 or 99 Vulcan, Kawasaki Vulcan 1500 Classic. Had a few modifications, has a jet kit, and obviously some straight pipes. What I've done to prepare for this test is I've taken both spark plugs out. On the other side of the bike where you access the crank, I've pulled the cover off of the center bolt of the crank, turned it with a wrench while holding in the clutch, and then got it to, there's an indicator, a little mark that says front top dead center, front cylinder top dead center, and rear cylinder top dead center. I've already tested the rear cylinder, and I'm about to do the front cylinder. In order to do this test, you effectively need a source of compressed air to plug into this gizmo. So I have that. I have a source of compressed air here, and there's essentially, I'm running at about 120 psi. And to do the test effectively, I'll go through the steps. You take your leak down tester and you zero it by setting the adjustment all the way down to 0 so it doesn't damage the tool in case your air pressure source is high pressure. So you plug the tool in, and then you wind this back down. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video here, but that's at 100%. We want to wind this slowly back down to 0, and you can just start to see it bite. As I turn it, you can see the needle going down. Goes down to 0, put it right on 0, be as precise as you can with your eye, and you're good. Keep it plugged in and do 2 test hookups to the cylinder. Now what I've done is I've taken the appropriate, there's 3 different adapters. This is the adapter that fits into the spark plug holes. 3 different adapters, they all have a regular air nipple here on the front. 3 different sized adapters for the most common threaded spark plug holes. And holding the coupler open, I just want to touch it on a couple times. Once, hold on. Make sure it zeroes out. And it didn't. It's set to 0. It's set to 1. So I reset it back to 0. Do it one more time. Now we're at 0. Back to 0. We just want to make sure it keeps resetting to 0. Then we do the test. Plug this in. Hold the gauge up, and we're at 10% leak down, okay? So this tool effectively, and we'll talk about the health of that. This tool effectively measures the rate of air movement from the air source, or the variance between the air source rate of movement into the air source of the air movement outside of the cylinder, okay, the combustion chamber. So it's a percentage. It's a rate comparison, not a volume comparison, okay, and that's why it's so accurate. So if we had air movement, if we had a high hissing and we wanted to sense where that air is going to, what we could do is we could put our hand in front of the carburetor to see if we have a leaking intake valve. We could put our hand on the end of the exhaust to see if there's air leaking out the exhaust, or we could pop the radiator cap off and see if we're getting air coming out the radiator cap, suggesting a leaky head gasket. Okay. In this case, we had a value of 10. 10% leak down is actually very good for an old bike like this. Ideally, we want to stay below 15%. 15% and above would indicate a need to rebuild the engine or do some sort of major work. Perhaps lapping the valves, refacing the valve seats, replacing a head gasket, or replacing the rings, which is quite involved. Although I've done it before on a bike like this, it's an involved process. It involves taking the engine out of the chassis, popping the heads off, and sometimes resurfacing the decks, or at least cleaning them, and then pulling the piston out. It would be an all-weekend type job. Fortunately, I had 10% in this cylinder. Before I started recording this, I actually got a reading of 12% on the rear, so I'm happy with that. So the engine's healthy, which means the backfire didn't damage, as far as I can see, as far as this tells me, it didn't damage the engine itself. What I'm thinking is, and I haven't taken off this air filter yet, what I'm thinking is if it was a really heavy backfire, there's a possibility, because I think I rejetted this bike about 10 years ago. It's a possibility it popped the carburetor off of the boot, which isn't a big deal to fix. It's a 5-minute job, and without that seated on there and getting a good seal in the intake track, that probably would prevent the bike from starting. So that is that. So Leak Down Tester Motion Pro, there's probably better quality tools than this out there, but this one does the trick for me. I do this probably 4 or 5 times a year, so I don't need anything more robust than this tool. So I reset it to 0, lock it back in, put it away, and I'm good to go. Great tool if you're not worth it if you're just doing one bike, but probably worth it if you're going to work on all your bikes on a go-forward basis. Anyway, until next time, take care.